Well, President Jacob Zuma is scheduled to return to the Zondo Commission of Inquiry this morning. Now, let's get you some context. 2 years ago, retired Justice Zak Jacoob chaired a People's Tribunal in which the public were offered the opportunity to give evidence into human rights issues. Now, that tribunal found that state capture cannot be separated from economic crimes and called on law enforcement agencies to act immediately against corruption. Let's chat to retired Constitutional Court Justice Zak Jacoob, who believes we should not be waiting for the outcomes of the Zondo Inquiry before people are held to account. Justice Jacoob, it's a great pleasure talking to you this morning on the AM report, and I think an important thing for us to do is to perhaps take a look at the People's Tribunal of 2 years ago that talked about economic crimes before democracy and how that has played a part in where we are today. Justice Jacoob, just take us back to the People's Tribunal.
It was a tribunal which heard a lot of evidence on economic crimes before apartheid went away, economic crimes in support of apartheid, where international sanctions were broken deliberately by South Africa and many other countries. Many people took money out of the country and sorted it out there. And the theory was that one of the problems was that for some reason the South African law enforcement authorities did not investigate those crimes at all, even though they should have done so. And that was really the problem. So the thinking was that the economic crimes that happen in the country now, the state capture elements that are occurring in the country now, are in a sense a continuation of what happened many, many years ago. And that unless all these things are effectively prosecuted, you're not going to stop state capture. Yeah. And I think there's a very strong view in favor of that thought.
And Justice Jacoob, that is in fact the explanation. It's the argument that's been used by many people who themselves have faced allegations of corruption through the state capture inquiry. This argument that it didn't begin with the ANC-led government.
Yeah, but that doesn't help, because if bad things began earlier, those who continue it are equally guilty. They cannot say that because it started earlier, we can be excused today. Yeah. So it really doesn't help them.
Yeah, it's what people like to call whataboutism these days. You know, you're accused of something and you say, yeah, but what about this one and that one? So, Justice Jacoob, just think about what's happening today at the state capture inquiry. We are once again waiting for former President Jacob Zuma to make himself available at the state capture inquiry. I'm sure you've been following the issues around Jacob Zuma accusing Justice Raymond Zondo of having a personal vendetta against him. In fact, that the whole state capture inquiry has been engineered in a way to undermine his government. As you weigh in on these issues, Justice Jacoob, with your own institutional knowledge over the past decades, how do you respond to it?
Well, I think that people who want to make these applications must make them. And I have no doubt that the Deputy Chief Justice would decide the issue fairly and properly, and hopefully they will accept his decision. It is for him to decide whether any reasonable person would have a reasonable apprehension that he will not have an open mind on the issue. And there's no point in prejudging that issue. It is for him to decide, and I'm absolutely certain that he will decide it honestly and properly. Let's just wait for that result and work with it. Yeah. Of course, it is true, as said earlier, that they could appeal the decision, and it could take a long time, but hopefully the position can be fast-tracked and these matters can be sorted out quite quickly. The point is that when people are in trouble, they will use every opportunity they can to defend themselves and avoid it. This has become a habit in our country today, and there seems little we can do about it.
Justice Jacoob, do you believe that this is really the big test of the state capture inquiry that will be unfolding today? there are several questions around the legitimacy of the inquiry itself, the fact that it perhaps hasn't succeeded in the way that South Africans would have hoped in getting the culprits of state capture. Does all of this legitimacy hang on how things unfold today?
I think not. State capture and commissions of inquiry are one way of doing things. I really think that the more effective way is to ensure that the police and the prosecution services expand their investigative capacity and charge people who are guilty of crime. To my mind, commissions of inquiry end up delaying things a great deal and just postpone what is to happen later. So if I were an accused in a huge criminal trial, I'd be very happy about a commission of inquiry. And the longer that commission of inquiry lasts, the happier I'd be, because it would take the point that my criminal trial shouldn't proceed until the commission is over.
And that's exactly the strategy we've seen by the former president in the country's courts over a period of many, many years.
Absolutely. And the problem with the commission is that it makes people believe that something is being investigated and makes people feel a sense of security and comfort, which is not a bad thing, but false security and false comfort is not a good thing either. Yeah. The real thing is to ensure aggressive criminal prosecution of people.
Yeah. And I mean, Justice Jacoob, just in terms of your own experience, you know, we've seen the hawks really, many analysts will say, drag their feet, not because they're willfully doing so, but because they don't have the skill set needed to prosecute economic crimes of this extent.
Yeah, I don't know precisely what, but I think that there are skills available in the country, and if the state is devoid of certain skills, the state must go ahead and hire them. Yeah. So in a way, that's right too, that we must ensure that the state allocates enough money for criminal prosecutions of this kind, which are very, sometimes can be very difficult. The other thing I would say is that there's no point in charging someone with 200 or 300 counts of fraud and waiting for years and years for the cases to go on. What I would do is choose 2 or 3 of my best counts, make life very complicated, and very few long trials of that sort have finished. So it's just my personal view that the better way is choose 2 or 3 cases in which you have a wonderful case. Don't overcomplicate. Leave the evidence simply in a few days and make sure that the trial is resolved.
I mean, we've seen that happening in our courts many, many times. Justice Jacoob, I have to leave it there. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for your incredible perspective this morning on the AM report. That's retired Constitutional Court Justice Zak Jacoob.